Right, so now we're going to talk about layers. We haven't really mentioned these, and you've seen a few panels come up. Some of the people have gone to the small releases we did. We did start to mention them, so you probably are aware of them. And the people that didn't go to the to those sort of releases, we'll start to talk about them now. So basically, under our MTF file for this road, you'll see this thing called design layer name. Okay, so it's just, mine defaults to the word design. So whenever I insert a template, insert strings and everything, this layer is going to be the actual default. But why do we need that layer? What's that, why do we have to have that? Because what happens now, I'm looking at my job. Now, this particular road, if we go to our view here, I've got an ultimate road design. Right, the ultimate road design, and you think about the number of things that you had to do as you go through the process of this to end up with the same job. And I'll guarantee you that you've had more than one MTF file and more than one apply many. I'll guarantee you. So in this particular job here, we've got a road set up. My ultimate profile is this on the screen. Okay, I've got a curb and channel footpath. I've got 2 lanes up the top here. I've got another lane here, which would be possibly a right turn lane later on for a median or something. And I've got another 2 lanes here, and I've got another concrete footpath. I've got a fairly decent looking ultimate profile, but I've got no money. Okay, like most councils, they'll turn around. The job starts off like this, and you end up building a goat track. But hopefully we can build something a little bit better than that. So the idea is what I want to build is this. So if I go to my final design, I want to build that. Okay, might change the duration so we can just see that it doesn't look like a giant curb. But I want to do what's in the orange. What's in the grey is the ultimate design. Okay, so what I want to do, I've decided I want to be able to, I might change it back because it did look better. It's easier to show. I wanted to use this lane of the ultimate road. That's all. That's the part I want to build. I wanted to build a shoulder out here for an interim design. And I wanted to also put a drain in, but I also wanted to build the final footpath, the concrete footpath. And I want that to be in the right position for the ultimate road whenever I get the money to go and build that extra road. No, there's nothing worse than coming back and saying, oh, the footpath's in the wrong spot. On the other side of the road, I want to be able to put a median in, and I want to build that lane. Not this lane, I want to build that one. But I want it all to match. So when I come back later on and I decide to put that right turn lane in, it all works. All the grades are all perfect. And I then don't want to build the rest of this part out here. All I want to do is just a shoulder and do a final fill batter. So that's quite a bit of little effort to be able to combine all this together. Now we can do all that in one modifier. And the reason we can, one MTF file. The reason we can do that is because 12D now has layers. So we only look at the left-hand side of the road, and we'll discuss quickly the right-hand side later on, depending on how much time we end up with. So on the left-hand side of the road, I take my profile. Now you can insert these things. I'm inserting a fixed template here, which is a complete design profile of my ultimate road. You can use the inserts and do it all yourself. You can even use a snippet, that sort of thing. But I'm just sort of trying to show you the really easy basics of it. So I've got a complete profile, and I've put it on a layer called design. When you look at when you get your V11 and you bring these panels up and you see all the inserts and all the templates, you'll see that little layer design. And if you don't do any of this sort of stuff, right, then just don't touch that field, and then we'll just act like normal. But it'd be nice to know that after all this, you do start to look at those layers and say, hey, I'm going to start to use this because it's really good. So all the strings that get created from my apply many that are in my models for the sections and strings will go on that layer. That's all. Okay. The other ones that I start to create, I will have to put on a layer myself. So, okay. So all that comes out of the apply many, whatever you put on design, that's the only layer that it uses. The first model for the sections and strings. Right. It's going from the start of the job to end of the job. So we're not going to worry about too many aliases in this particular job, and it's going to go on a model called design. Right. So I run the job, and then what I've got now, if I go back and look at my profile, I now want to be able to look at my interim. So I want to start to say, well, how am I going to attach this drain and this shoulder to start with to the ultimate string and, another MTF file, another apply many. And I better make sure I recalc that in my chain after I've done the ultimate. So all those sorts of ideas that are quite annoying. So now I can go to, and I can start to insert my interim design. Okay, so if I go to my interim design, first thing I want to do is I want to latch onto the carriageway string on my ultimate design. So I bring up my insert absolute. It's going to be your friend. Right, the insert absolute will allow you to create a string on a different layer. Okay, so I call it interim. And I'm going to call it C2L, the same as what the actual ultimate string is. I just think that's a good idea. But you can call it whatever you want. So the idea is insert absolute does a actual base or a width option, 0, 0, and also picks up exactly where that string is as level-wise. But it has this new things in here where you're able to pick up layers, and later on we'll start to talk, it mightn't be today, but we'll start talking about what the repercussions of that external string option. So in other words, the upshot of that is you can pick something that's not in your apply many, and that's really cool. So all I'm basically doing is starting to create my actual interim design, and it's going to hang off my carriageway edge on my ultimate design. Right, so I've got my first string. I've called it C2L as well. Then I turn around, I'm going to put in my shoulder, okay? But I'm putting it on the interim layer. I'm starting to create this all up. I'm building up my actual interim part. So it obviously goes, when I do the insert, it's going to go from the edge of shoulder on the interim. I could have used an insert command, but it's then going to go and be 1 metre away from the carriageway edge at -3%. So I'm starting to build that part up. But what I'd like to do is say, yeah, that's okay, but I'm forward thinking here. I'm thinking to myself, well, what if the road super elevates? You know, maybe I might later on demo that. So this particular shoulder, it'd be nice if this shoulder went up and down with the rest of the road, with the ultimate design. And the ultimate design, strings that I use in my super elevation. So obviously I have to match the crossfall. So again, that interim design, I simply just turn around and say, by the way, get your crossfall from the design string called C2L. So whatever the crossfall is on the ultimate road, if you happen to change it, right, this new shoulder, which is on my interim layer, it will also match the super elevation. So I'm starting to build that up. Okay, so I've got that part done. I'm latched onto my interim design, to my ultimate design. I've done my shoulder. It's going to match this crossfall all the time for me. Now I want to go down and put the rest of the drain in. So again, it's just a whole lot of insert command, just like you would normally do. So I simply just go insert, and I say, okay, I want to get 2 metres at ½ metre. I'm going to call that drain 1 left-hand side, whatever it may be, and it's again on a layer called interim. So I'm now starting to get this point, and then again I then do that point. So now as I do this, you've got the ability, the fact that I've already allowed you to see these strings. Okay, so at the moment, if you were doing this, creating them as you went, you wouldn't actually see the strings until you finally went recalc, but also added them to a model. And I'll show you how to do that in a moment, but the reason why you're seeing this here is because I've already done that process for you. I put the drain in, and then finally, the last little part here, I've now gone and latched onto the footpath, using the insert absolute option for the ultimate design, which is the FPL one. Right, so I set that up. The rest of the road is my ultimate design, is my footpath profile that is fairly critical to the future of the whole process. So the rest of that's already done for me. That's already on my actual design layer. So I've gone through, picked all that up. Right, so on the right-hand side, we won't discuss that one. It's a pretty similar process. We'll just give you a quick idea what's going on there. So on the right-hand side, because on the right-hand side is where I actually ended up creating all the strings so you can see the actual design in the final process. So again, inside here, we're inserting a template, just like we did before. We're creating the interim layer. So in that case there, we're inserting some templates that is the medium profile. So I can do that. I can insert full templates, I can insert the fixed templates, and I can put it on a layer called interim. So I'm now starting to build up that interim layer on the right-hand side of the road. Again, I'm also latching on to the edge of shoulder over here, like I did before, and also then producing my shoulder and my final cut and fill. The rest of this point out here, that's the ultimate design. I probably never will build it. Right, so the idea of all that is when I get down to the bottom and I run my job, I've now got a combination of things. I've got my ultimate strings, right, which come from my actual design, and I've got these other strings that I've created, which is my interim design. I now want to be able to say, well, how do I join them up? How do I make them into one model, which is my final design model? Okay, so you've got to get past this idea of the apply many always creating just sections of strings for you, end of story. This is going to create strings for you that, let's have a look. All right, so we go up into the create strings, and what this basically means is that I'm able to go through, and I'll use Mick's favourite word, cherry pick, all the strings that I wish to use in my final design. Okay, and that is a combination of strings. In this case here, you've only got a couple of layers, so it's not that hard. So I'm going to say, okay, from the outside, now when you create these layers, and we'll show you this again later on, there is a selection here. You can say, I want all the layers that were on the interim, all the strings that I created, all those drain strings and everything, I want them all on one layer. That's fine, I can do that. So I use the all strings on the left-hand side. Or I can grab all the ones on the right-hand side, put them all on one model. But I don't really want that. I want a combination of the interim drain strings and so forth, plus whatever I want out of the ultimate design, and then that's what I'm going to use. So when I create that final design, I only got strings. Okay, so you're going to go to your favourite little option called under sections called cut through strings, and I'm sure everyone here has used those sometime or other in 12D. So you're going to cut sections through the final design later on, and you might find that's something you do anyway, but through a convoluted process of chains and MTF files. So all I have to do here now is simply just say what strings do I want, and you simply just insert it in the actual grid, okay, and you just go right click here, whatever layer I want design, and it will populate and give you a list of all the strings that are in the design layer, which is the ultimate profile that I first started with, which I don't want all of, all right, and you can pick what you want. Okay, so I'm just going through. I'm going to say, look, I want the interface here, I want the batter, I want the footpath string because that's what I was going to do on the left-hand side. I now want to start to go down the interim design. I want to pick up the table drain. I want to go across to where the shoulder was. Okay, and I want to go on the right-hand side, pick up all the drain and so forth. So it's not a particular hard process. The fact that all this is done, even picking that takes a minute. But the idea is that you've now got two designs in one, and they all interact, right? So if the ultimate design changes for some reason, okay, if you add an extra lane in, whatever you may do, then your interim design will update, and subsequently your final design updates. So it's going to be a world of difference for how you attack jobs. And this is just a simple one that I thought was easy to explain what layers are about and so forth. So it's actually creating all those strings for you. So if I go through now, I've got a chain here that cuts my cross sections through my final design strings, again, which are a combination of ultimate and the interim. So we go and have a look at our alignment string. Right, so I've got my ultimate alignment. This actual alignment string is obviously for both of them. So if I go through and say, okay, I'm going to look at my super elevation for this particular road, I'll drop down to my design. I'm going to pick up my urban road. I'm just going to run that at 70. That's fine by me. I'm going to recalc my road, and I'm going to, in this view here, I'll just recalc my ultimate tin. Okay, so now that's actually run. It's super elevated the road. The grey part is the tin, so I can show it to you a lot easier. The section I profiled is the final design. Okay, so I now want that to make sure that those strings have moved up. Okay, so when I go and run my chain, which cuts my design sections, I simply just say okay, nice little prompt option. It runs my sections. Even for a simple little job like that, that's pretty cool. And the amount of times you have to sit there and think about different MTF design things that you have to run to get that. This is all inside the one MTF file. The good thing about those layer strings, and like those interim ones that I've got there, you don't have to use them all. You know, like there may be times when you create a string that's only for construction purposes, and it may then feed another string that you're going to use. You know, so keeping the idea, you don't always have to use every string that you actually create there. Right, so that's the idea. So if I then go through and say, okay, if I'm looking at, and we all know that things do change and that sort of stuff. So if I go to the right side of my job, I may then turn around and say, well, okay, by the way, I've allowed a median there for my ultimate design, or it was just a lane line. Now I've got a median. Oh, that should have been a little bit wider. Okay, it should have been 5.5 metres wide. I need to have a proper right turn lane later on. So obviously we can turn around and modify the ultimate design. So here I'm just modifying my carriageway edge string on the right hand side and make it 5.5 metres wide. So again, I go through, run that, and if I run my chain, we'll now see for the finished service cross sections, I now run that, it then updates for me. Okay, because you get the two designs linked together. So hopefully that's a good example. It's only a small example of how you can use these layers, and as we go, we're going to drop back in a job and get a little bit more complicated, probably a lot more complicated. But it gives you an idea of where you can go with this. And I said, like, it's not only the matter of sticking to design and never ever going down this track. This is a simple little example, show you how you can start to mingle these together. So we go back to the other job. Right, so in this job here, we'll just have a look at the other little side of the road first before we go into this one. Getting a lot more adventurous, aren't I? Right, it's inside my design. All right, so on this side of the road, on the right-hand side of the road, we bring this up. This is a little bit of a different idea. It's utilising layers, and it just gives you an idea of where else you can go with this. So inside my job, I've got this. So on the left-hand side of the road is the fixed decisions that we did before. Okay, so the generators, you can see that little bit of those batter lines, how they stop at the cross section and then they don't go any further. They're just not that little bit smarter to anticipate where that batter could run out and those sorts of things. On the right-hand side, we've got the batters, looks very similar, but we've actually got these little things here where you think, oh, that's not bad. That little batter ran out and found out where it went from nothing, from 3 metres to nothing. Okay, so what this little option here that we're running there that does that is a thing under the trim option called trim to tin. So we're just going to quickly just go through and explain what that does for you. Drives me insane, this. Right, so we go back to our modify on the right-hand side, and you're surprised how few commands this is and what it's just done for you. Okay, before you, remember I had 30 odd commands before, doing all those decisions and picking things up and stuff. It was doing a few more things than what this is doing. Right, so, excuse me. Right, so I'm inserting my template. All right, so it's a little bit of a different type template. And I put it on a layer called FinishService. This particular trim type thing goes through layers or utilises the layers, goes through in a slightly different part of the code, so it works on a layer other than your design. So obviously I'm just using FinishService here. But it doesn't matter what you do now, because if you can use it, who cares what those layers are? You just have a good naming convention maybe. But once you've done this, you then go and cut through all the strings you want, just like I did before. You say, this is the strings that I want to do for my design, cut my cross sections, and I'm off. So what this particular thing does, we'll have a template first, might be a better idea. Keep in mind there's only about 5 modifiers there. Right, this is what this guy looks like. All right, so in the fixed part of the template, and you could have inserted these manually or done a snippet, I've inserted the whole profile of my road. Okay, this is what I expect in the cut part of my road. Okay, so I've inserted all the beams and I've done that big long one goes up the top there. That's the final cut and fill, all right, which is what I did before. So I just made it 100 metres at minus 50, which is reminiscent of what your final cut and fill is normally. So I've set that up. So what this little option is going to do for you to trim to tin, imagine what it's going to do. Your profile is going to be sticking out of the ground, and then it's just going to go and trim all those strings back to the tin surface for you. So and that's why when you saw in that view, how you get the extensions of the actual burns, because it knows where that tin's going. It checks for you where that intersection is. So you get a lot better looking burn batters and things like that than you will with the fixed decisions, even the fixed decisions, but definitely the old decisions. So that's all it basically is. And what it basically means is I then turn around, I put it onto a layer, and I'm utilising my layers here just like I did before with interim and ultimate. I've got a layer called road trim cut. Okay, great. It's the edge of shoulder, the whole thing done through, and all I have to do is just say this trim links to tin. How easy is this? What layer? Finish surface level. What string? Edge of shoulder right. Trim the outside from there out. So every single string outside of that shoulder string, it will now trim back to the tin surface for you, and you end up with all those lovely berms, all those extensions, all done the way you get actual intersections of where things stop, because it's intersecting to a tin and doing a lot of Mick can probably tell you all about that, but it's pretty cool stuff. Right, so that's okay. It's done all that for me, but what am I going to do about the fill? Okay, so I've got the fill area over here. Okay, so the fill area, all right, I've got the edge of shoulder, but the edge of shoulder that I had is in the cut part of the model. It's in that layer called finish surface level. So what I'm able to do is, what I really want to do is I really wanted to go from the edge of shoulder in that original finish surface level template, and I want to do a fill batter. So what I can do to make it life a bit easier for me is I can insert a string on a layer called fill batter, okay, edge of shoulder right, and I use the the command. So I'm going out, so that I'm basically replicating the edge of shoulder string that was in the other template, because it's already there, you know, and I can't use that string, so I want to use this one here. So I'm inserting a string that I'm never really going to see. It's a construction string, and it's sitting on top of the other shoulder, and it's on my layer called fill batter, because I then want to hang my final fill off that, and that's the one I trim back like I did with the cut. So it's just a situation where you're using another layer string, but never seeing it. So inside here, I simply insert that string, I do my fill batter, okay, because I'm not using a template here, I'm inserting the strings. So I insert 50 metres at minus 50, and I use the trim to tin again, and it trims it back. And the only difference is, instead of trimming back the cut layer, I'm trimming back the fill batter. But that's where I need that edge of shoulder string. So I duplicate the edge of shoulder string on the fill batter layer, but I never actually wanted to see it. I just used it. So in other words, it's a construction type string. So it's a very nice little option. And then basically what happens is you simply come down to here and you say, what sort of strings do I want? What strings do I want for my actual design? So inside here, I'm actually picking up that one string on the actual design for the fill batter, which is the one I just did before. And then I want all the other ones for the cut. So I'm building up my design, and again I have another chain that just cuts the cross sections, just like I did before. And it's not something alien to you. You've all done cut through strings. You know, so it's something you will start to do a lot because you can do these combined designs. Right, so if we now go back to our other job, this one's getting a little bit more technical. Like most things, the idea of all this is that it will, I'll just bring up the barrier one. The idea of this is to show you the combination of the decisions along with layers to solve quite a complicated little area. So if I go to my cross-section view and we have a look at that, don't you love it? Right. We've got this situation. So if I just go to the cross section that makes a bit more sense for you. Right, it's this sort of idea. Now, we'll have a look at the job. I'll just give you a brief idea of what the scenario is. Right, we've got two roads, obviously side by side. Excuse me. And I'm putting a concrete barrier between the two. Right, the left-hand side road and the right-hand side road do this, up and down. So while on the left-hand side of the road, when this string is higher, right, I want to form my standard concrete barrier. And on the other side of the road, which obviously is dropping, I want that slope to be maintained and also this slope here to be maintained to create a wall. As I go to the next part of the job, the right-hand side of the road will suddenly be higher than the left-hand side of the road. So I want to do the reverse. I want to have the concrete barrier on the right-hand side is my standard profile, and I then want to be able to go down to the bottom. In other words, I want to do this. I want to do this. The opposite. That's not easy. Okay, and as I said, I've basically talked to a few guys who do create tins and all sorts of things to intersect and create points and all that sort of to get this to work. But inside here, it's still a fair few modifiers, but it's a lot easier. So what the idea is I've got a string here in the middle, okay, which is alignment string in my job, which is the center of my median, center of my barrier. So I know where this barrier is going to stop and start. I then utilise the option then utilise the option to create these magenta coloured strings. Now what those magenta coloured strings are, they're on a layer called construction. So they are inserted about my control line down the middle, which is my median barrier, and they basically just create a barrier of some sort, right? That I'm never going to really latch onto or use. It just creates the shape on a layer called construction. What I'm after from those construction strings is this. I want to be able to do this. Now this is a quick idea on these name grades because they're quite important, and we do start to use them in the fixed boxing after the lunch and all sorts of things like that, and also tomorrow in a lot of the pavements things. So I have to explain what it's all about. A name grade is just a surface, okay? And you give it a logical name because it's nice and easy, like the aliases. You give it a decent name, and they're really easy to create. And basically all they mean is that you pick two strings. So what I'm interested in doing is I want to know the crossfall on this shoulder. Okay, so I create a name grade, I give it a decent name, I pick two strings, that's it. That's all you have to do. On the right-hand side of the road, right, I do the same thing. I then turn around, pick two strings there, create an actual name grade. So what I wanted the construction string, what I wanted the barrier for, right, was to know the slopes on the barrier. And that's all that was for. So that's what this ends up being. So I can now pick two strings on the layer called construction, okay, without even seeing those strings. I know they're part of my design, and I can nominate those two grades because I need those two slopes on the barrier to find out where this intersection is and where that intersection is. And that's the beauty of the layers, being able to create something that you're using as a construction process, in this case to get two named grades, but I'm never going to see the strings. They're part of my design though. So basically, just quickly on the left-hand side of the road, you end up with a few things like this. It utilises one of the actual, so I'm inserting my profile, start my fixed decisions. So what I'm basically looking through this part here is I'm looking at the cut batters and stuff like that. But the idea is that, hey, I was doing so well, wasn't I? My right side. Right, here it is here. I thought it was a bit different. Right, so in this case here, I'm inserting my table drain, and here I'm setting up the construction for the barrier. So you notice that when I insert these strings, they're all on a model called Construction MCA1. So that's creating the little barrier shape. All right. The thing I want from there are those slopes on the sides of the barrier. So down the bottom here, when I get further down, I'm setting up the barriers as named grades. If I drop down to these sorts of ones, you can see I bring up, what is it, name grade. So that's all a name grade basically is. As I said before, it's very simple. You give it a logical name and you pick 2 strings. So in that case there, it also allows you to pick an external string. So what that allows me to do in this particular job is to pick the other side of the road, because that other side of the road, those strings are not in this MTF file. They're not part of that design, but I can use the external string option and pick 2 strings in that design, and that will always give me that name grade. It is very, very useful. So the idea is that the whole thing is controlled, so the actual construction of all this is, as I run down, I create all that, and I drop down to here, and I do a simple decision modifier, a fixed decision one, and it's solely set up to say which string is higher. Okay, is the one on the left-hand side of the road on the shoulder, is that higher than the other side of the road? So that's how I know which one to do. So as I go through the process, I'll look at this road here. We'll go back to the real world job. Right, that's how I know what to do here. If this string is higher, is lower than that one, or that one's higher than that, I know that on this side of the road, I want to do the actual standard barrier height. So I go insert, 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 okay, and I do this little option here. And that's option there, and we'll have a look at that when we do the actual boxing later on. I think we're running out of time somewhere. It's the intersection of 2 surfaces. It's pretty straightforward, but we'll have a look at that afterwards. So that's what I'm actually creating. So when it's the other way around, right, I'm inserting the actual barrier. I'm trying to find out what the intersection is down here. It's a very nice option to show you just checking how far above 2 strings are, and also then using the construction barrier. So I think it'll hopefully give you an idea of what all those layers and those sort of things are all about. Right, there's much more on that. So the idea is of those sorts of things, as we go through, even after lunch, start doing fixed boxing, and we start to do some of these commands and showing you some of these intersect commands like this I'm talking about over here. These sorts of things, okay? We'll be doing that, and we'll be using the name grades, showing how you can do boxing like that in the fixed part of your road, and slowly build it up. So I hope that gives you a good idea what layers are all alike. It's not an easy thing to put across in a few words, but hopefully we start to get an idea of what we're on about. So tomorrow when you start to see the really good stuff, you'll know what the layers are all mean. Right, so I'm just going to go back and look at this job. Mick wants to give you a little bit more of an explanation. As I said, we're controlled by time constraint here, so I apologise if I went over something and didn't quite get it. But you imagine I've been doing this for months and months and months. So we go to we'll turn off the actual links, the trim links, and we'll go apply. So we can actually get, and we'll just run the chain for the cross sections. We should run the cross sections a little bit further apart than a metre. Right, so this just gives you an idea of the actual profile. So if I go look at the actual profile in a section view, right, so that one there, basically this is my surface before it gets cut. So back inside our plan view, we're looking at the same thing on there. So you can see that's the actual profile in my strings option. You start to see that's the actual profile of what my strings are like before they get cut. So Mick just wants to explain a little bit more about the intricacies of the actual trimming.
Is that working? Yep. Yeah, what I basically just wanted to say with Peter here, this is a slightly new technique of doing things where we simply over-insert in the cut situation. Now what happens is we can say, that way, with the normal decision process, at some stage it goes from cut to fill, and it'll always miss that little bit of an intersection. So what we're doing here is simply over-inserting, and what the apply can do then is it can work out the exact interface of those berm points of where they hit the tin and then trim it back. So what we're doing is actually inserting extra cross sections in for you automatically at all the points where those berm and top of the bottom of the strings intersect the tin. And that's why you get the very pretty job, because it's got all the information past where the cut fill point is. Yeah, that's all I was going to say. With all this stuff, it's evaluating, it's an exact intersection. It evaluates all the modifiers till it gets that exact intersection point with the tin. Yeah, so it's just a different way of doing it, just simply that over insertion. That's all I just sort of wanted to bring up just to clarify.